Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's episode of Hunting Matters, brought to you by the Houston Safari Club Foundation. We're joined this week by Bobby Deeds. Bobby is a wildlife specialist with Record Rack Deer Feeds. Record Rack is one of Houston Safari Club Foundation's partners, and we're excited to have you today. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So where are you calling in from today?
I live in Central Texas. Pretty much the easiest way to describe it is if you hit the geographic center of Texas with a dart. I live about 10 minutes east of the dart, kind of between Brownwood and Brady, if anybody knows where that is.
Yep.
But I live on a ranch right there. But where my job takes me is usually 400 miles north, south, east, or west of here. Just depends on the day of the week.
Sounds like sales territory I used to have years ago.
Yes, sir.
When I used to cover everything from San Antonio to the Valley over to Del Rio, so I empathize with you. I don't mind the windshield time though sometimes. How about you?
Oh yeah, no, it's part of the gig. I mean, you either love it or hate it, but yeah, no, it gives me plenty of time to think about where I'm going and figure out what I got to do next, because it seems like every ranch is different, whether they're all high
Yeah.
fences or low fences or whatever, but everybody's got their own set of problems. So a lot of times I got to spend a lot of time in between those ranches trying to work a lot of that stuff out, so I know what I'm getting into before I get there.
Right. Well, I want to talk about that here in a little bit, but let's go back. Back to when you were younger. You grew up there in Central Texas. How did that early life experience kind of form what you do today and shape your interest in wildlife management?
Well, I mean, I grew up on the ranch that I live on now. It was
Okay.
originally a 2,000-acre ranch, and what it's been, cut up as it's been handed down through the years. But obviously, cattle and hunting is what we did, and we raced horses as well. My father was a big hunter, taught me how to hunt, what basically gave me my passion for it, and that kind of built as I went into college and what I decided to major in and all that. But it's just I see a lot of it. I have three boys, and I see myself in a lot of them as well, just because if they've got any spare time, especially bow season kicked off last week, I was in a tree hunting something. So, and my boys are the same, and it really just being able to grow up out in the brush like I did just kind of set me on the path that put me where I am today. Just gave me a real strong passion for wildlife, wanting to learn more about it and just continue to grow as a wildlife biologist and wildlife specialist. And I've been blessed to get a job where I actually get to do that for a living. So, I mean, like they say, find something you love to do and you'll never work another day in your life. And that's one of the ones I guess can say that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Did you grow up hunting? What was the first thing? Were you hunting small game, big game, ducks? What was it?
I mean, obviously, if you're from Central Texas, by the time you can walk, you usually have a gun in your hand.
Mm.
But yeah, BB gun, birds, and then we small game, and then graduated up once I could, competently shoot a rifle. My father had us hunting deer when we were 10, 11, 12 years old or earlier. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was as soon as we could be outside, that's what we typically did. We hunted. We were hunting or we were fishing if we weren't working.
Sure. Yeah, when I was a kid, I don't know if I have told many people this story, but I got my butt whipped pretty good on this one. We were at a neighbor's house down the street, and we were kids, and we said, "Well, man, there's a lot of birds out here." So we got the BB guns out and threw a bunch of breadcrumbs out the yard. And when my buddy's dad got home, it wasn't pretty
Oh yeah,
because we had
and
proudly displayed all of the blackbirds and things we'd shot out in the backyard. And yeah, it wasn't a pretty sight.
yeah, no, there wasn't much safe within a quarter mile of the house when we were kids. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Hunting Matters is sponsored by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Under the visionary leadership of founder Johnny Morris, Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's is leading North America's largest conservation movement. Together with their partners in conservation, they're positively shaping the future of the outdoors through donations, grant making, and advocacy. The 501c3 Outdoor Fund raises funds to support conservation efforts by activating more than 200 million passionate sportsmen and women, rounding up their purchases in Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's stores and online. Visit BassPro.com or Cabela's.com today.
So you got your bachelor's and your master's in animal science, range and wildlife management. Familiar with those? Not something that I pursued, but I work with a lot of students at the collegiate level in those programs. And you went to Angelo State University. What was it your upbringing? Was it something you always wanted to do and kind of knew at an early age that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, when you get into college, I don't think anybody really knows what they want to do. But yeah, it was definitely the one thing that I knew I had an interest in. I kind of dabbled around with kinesiology and a few other things, thought I might want to be a coach. And then the more as I've got into it, figured out that, you know, agriculture was what I was primarily wanting to go into. I didn't even know the role that I have now, and probably this role 20 years ago when I got out of college, this role wasn't even really a thing yet, because the whole supplementally feeding wildlife, or high fence management, a lot of things, it was starting to get going, starting to get wheels. But as far as really growing like it has over the last 20 years, we had guys that were focused on wildlife but were not dedicated to it. So I wanted to get an education in it, because I thought, well, worst come to worst, I'll be a ranch manager. I mean, I would love to have done that as well. But got lucky enough to get hired on with Cargill, and that was kind of when the whole, at least wildlife supplementation, from supplementally feeding wildlife to grow bigger antlers, kind of really started to catch a whole nother gear. And we had a wildlife specialist about a few years after I came into Cargill, and then I was lucky enough to mentor under him, was a man named Louis Etzel, who I admire tremendously and learned a lot from. If anything, learned more from him than I ever did in college about, wildlife and management. And that goes without saying when I work with people in the field too. I learn more by doing this stuff every day, just because anybody that says that they know everything there is to know about wildlife management is probably trying to sell you something, because it's something that's what I really love about it, is because there's so much that we learn every year and constantly evolves. So, now being able to do that while I was in college and just have the opportunity to really, it gave me a good groundwork or base for it. But I'm not going to say that because I went to Angelo State and got that degree that I knew I was going to be doing this from day one. It was just something that God's plan kind of worked out. You know what I mean?
Right. Now, you mentioned your boys earlier. You got 3 boys. We have 3 boys as well. How old are they now?
Let's see. My oldest one is 18. He's a senior in high school, about to graduate. Evan is 15. He's a freshman in high school. And Easton is 8 years old and in 2nd grade.
Have they all got the hunting bug? Did they all kind of gravitate towards that?
Oh yeah. No, it's every one of them has probably more rifles than most grown men do already. And, when they get out of football practice this afternoon, I assume the first thing Easton's going to ask me when he walks through the door is if we can go dove hunting. So, yeah, no, they live and breathe it. Like I said, when we're not rodeoing or we're not at some athletic event or something else, we're going to be hunting or fishing most likely.
Yeah, what a blessing you guys get to do that and have that resource available to you, because there's a lot of people out there who just they want to get into it. They don't know about it. They kind of want to learn it, or they just don't have a place to go. So that's truly a blessing you guys have that.
No, absolutely. And I'd much rather see them doing that and have a passion for it than sitting there staring at an iPhone.
Yeah. My, when I was a kid, I lived in Louisiana. I grew up in Louisiana, and we lived right there on the bayou. And sometimes I'd be gone Friday afternoon after, like you said, if we didn't have a football game or football practice in the off season, we'd be gone Friday afternoon, didn't come back till Sunday. And my mother knew. I'm like, well, we'll be at the duck blind, or we'll be over in this lake or that lake, and we'd camp out all weekend. And I think that's probably one of the things that kept me out of a lot of trouble during my high school years, was that I preferred duck hunting or chasing frogs or alligators or something versus driving in circles through the Sonic or the local DQ and getting in trouble.
Yeah, that's one of the blessings of getting to live in a rural community like we live too, because most of the other boys that are raised, around here are raised very similar to mine, so we have no trouble turning them loose, and we may not see them after they get done with football for the same reason. They're going to go disappear on somebody's ranch and be running dogs, chasing pigs, deer hunting, doing something out in the brush, which, right. I couldn't ask for a better place or setting to raise a kid in.
Right.
Capital Farm Credit understands that there's something about the outdoors that pulls you in. Could be the fresh air, the colors, the smells, the animals, the freedom. It's all just a part of who you are. And with our recreational land loans, you can purchase land for whatever outdoor pursuit you please. That way, the outdoors won't just be in your soul, it'll also be in your name. To learn more, visit CapitalFarmCredit.com. Together, we're better.
Right. You've been with Cargill Animal Nutrition Record Rack for I guess 20 years now. What is it that keeps you passionate about your work for those 2 decades that you've been there?
Yeah, I went to work for him May of 2004 is when I went to work for Cargill. And yeah, I mean, obviously the biggest thing is like I alluded to earlier, is the fact that Cargill basically gives me a lot of freedom to basically lead the business when it comes to a wildlife standpoint. And with that freedom, it's just something that, I like the science part of it. That's the main reason I kind of went down the path that I did in college. And Cargill basically saying, okay, we need to figure out what the science is and everything that we need to know about wildlife feed, whether we're talking about pin deer, pasture deer, exotics, whatever species. They're all different, but quantifying exactly nutritionally what's going on with those animals, I mean, we're at its infancy, basically. So we learn something new every week as a nutrition company. At least that's what you should be doing. And if you're not changing your rations or doing something annually to make them better, to address whatever's going on in the industry or whatever environmental challenges that we're facing, then you're going to be behind. So what's really cool about my job is it's a constantly moving target, which I like. It's not something that gets stale. And it's a growing segment. If you look at what's going on with just agriculture in general, with commercial, production agriculture, and what's going on with recreational land in the state of Texas anyways, more and more of that land continually gets put into recreational use versus traditional agriculture. So again, a growing market, more people that I get to deal with every day, and more challenges that we get to try to meet every day. So again, because it's challenging, I guess, is the main thing, because I've always been somebody that, I want to compete, I like to win, but I don't want to just do the same thing every day, and this job allows me to do that.
Right, right. And you're a certified wildlife biologist, correct?
Yes, sir.
I'm guessing that brings a lot of, to your clients, that brings a big comfort level to have that, that knowledge and that experience and that background, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, in Texas, there's a certified wildlife biologist on every corner, pretty much, if you ask them. But it's, like I said, a lot of this stuff, you can get a certification with just online pretty much. But the biologist part of it, I really think comes with the gray hairs, you know what I mean? Dealing with hundreds of ranches over time, different problems, whether it's nutritionally related or just some kind of environmental challenge or maybe a herd dynamic issue, something going on at the ranch that is completely unrelated feed wise. Yeah, that's a big plus for a lot of our people that do ultimately buy something from us, because a lot of times problems can be tied back to nutrition, but typically if there's a ranch experiencing some kind of an issue, it's usually some kind of a management or environmental or habitat related something that if you didn't have, a biology type background or wired for that, you'd never pick it up. And you can't just throw a feed at a habitat issue or something like that, or a herd issue and correct it.
Right.
So, yeah.
Hunting Matters is presented by Copandero Indoor Archery Pistol and Rifle Range, your premier indoor archery pistol and rifle shooting destination. Located in Oak Ridge North, right next to the Woodlands, Copandero offers 2 25-yard pistol ranges, a 100-yard rifle range, and a 25-yard archery range. Whether you're honing your skills or just starting, Copandero has everything you need, including rentals, classes, a retail store, an in-house cafe, and a VIP lounge. Join Copandero today for an unmatched shooting experience. To learn more, go to copandero.com.
Yeah. From your perspective, I know and it changes year to year, but from your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges in habitat and wildlife management in Texas today?
Well, probably the biggest one is going to be land fragmentation, I would think, just because you get a lot of places as land gets passed down through generation, it gets sold off, and the trend right now is to break it into smaller tracts, because the smaller tracts you can get more average money per acre. So you see a lot of that, and it's hard to manage, a population on even 200 acres sometimes, which, that's a large place in some parts of Texas now, or parts of anywhere in the United States. So that's really the biggest challenge, or for people that have small, parcels of land and try to manage it, because you don't know, you can't control what your neighbors are going to do. And, that's why you see formation of things like wildlife co-ops and things like that are good. And that's also why you see a lot of people that do have, even just a couple 100 acres or more, throw up high fences, because that's really the only way they can effectively manage some of it sometimes. But that's definitely the biggest problem, or not problem, I say challenge, that I see with a lot of places, because you can sit there and throw all the feed you want at it, do everything right on small acreage, and your neighbor be doing everything wrong, and it basically cancels it out. So that's probably the biggest challenge, that I see from when you try to get somebody, on a management program or a plan, and they don't have a whole lot of land. And, I talk to more and more customers and people that are trying to, improve their deer herd, or even have exotics on their land. And that's usually the issue, is I can't control what my neighbor's doing. So that's the biggest one, I would think. There are different things, everybody tries to throw the doom and gloom stuff like CWD and all the other stuff at it. I really truly believe that a lot of that stuff's been here since God put deer on the map, and we're just testing prevalency, finding more and more of it. But I'm not concerned with a lot of that. I think that's social media, and a lot of that stuff gets gaslighted more than it should be. Like, people should just worry about good, sound animal husbandry and management, and I think the population will take care of itself. But it's just trying to manage one property right next to another one that's trying to do something else. So that's usually the biggest challenge, unless they wrap it with hot fence, which is becoming more and more of a trend as well. Which is not without its own set of challenges. Just because you put a high fence around it doesn't mean you're going to solve all your problems. A lot of times it can make it even tougher.
How so?
Well, I mean, when you put a closed population, basically, then you have to manage it, or God's going to manage it for you, because they can't leave if they run out of groceries or the habitat's not right. So you have to constantly maintain that population within the carrying capacity of that high fence ranch, or you're going to run into a wall. Where if it's low fence and say it doesn't rain, I mean, if it doesn't rain on a high fence, you better feed them. If you don't feed them, they're going to die. So,
right.
Water, if your water dries up and you're not aware of it, guess what? They can't jump the fence and go get a drink. So it's a lot more management intensive, I guess, is when, and a lot of people don't realize that, I think, when they first get a high fence ranch.
Yeah.
Are you looking for an investment that goes beyond the ordinary? Wildlife Partners is the nation's leader in breeding and consulting for the exotic wildlife industry. When you invest in wildlife, you're not just acquiring a 100% tax-deductible asset, you're playing a vital role in the conservation of endangered species. Do you own land? You can turn your ranch into a profitable wildlife-driven business. And even if you don't own land, that's no problem. Wildlife Partners offers unique opportunities for non-landowners to invest in conservation while enjoying significant tax benefits and potential cash flow.
I've read over the years and heard about these success stories when you have these co-ops where you got low fence adjacent properties that are low fence, and everybody gets on the same page and that sort of thing. Is that becoming less and less? And is it because of the fragmentation and people don't know their neighbor, and, things have changed over time as far as friendliness and that sort of thing? Or are you seeing some success stories still out there?
Not really. I mean, to be honest, the co-op deal, when I first came in to the business, in the early 2000s, I gave a lot of nutritional talks specifically to wildlife co-ops, and it's been over 10 years since I spoke. I know of a couple that are still kind of going, but the majority of them have really kind of fizzled out and faded away. And I really do, because I think a lot of people have lost the ability to effectively communicate with a face-to-face type situation, you know what I mean? Whether it is, with that, and a lot of people that own land now don't live on it. So, or even at lease land. So you got the land fragmentation deal. Most of the people that own that land, they're absentee landowners. So you couldn't go up and shake their hand even if you wanted to, because you don't know when they're going to be there. They're not there all the time. They're not really a true neighbor, where growing up, you'd see your neighbor almost every day if you were out on the fence line. So, I mean, those days are gone. So that it makes it tough to kind of get a relationship with somebody when, you can only do it through a cell phone.
Yeah. So your clients that are not living on their properties, I mean, what's typically, how do you interact with them? Is it like did they say, I'm going to be here next week, or can you come out and do a consultation, or how does that work? That's got to be difficult.
It's 7 days a week. I mean, a lot of the times it's most of the interactions I get with them are during hunting season, or we'll kind of go with them, and towards the end of hunting season, I try to get with everybody, particularly the big ones. I don't really work with a lot of smaller land guys. Most of the guys I deal with are really large operations, but I do have a lot of people are calling me constantly. I'll help anybody. I'm not say I'm not going to work with you unless you got 10,000 acres, but the majority of the people that I do deal with, it is let's go make a loop around your ranch whenever you're there. Most of the time that's going to be on a weekend or whenever their schedule allows. Gives me an idea what I'm looking at, and then I can make just a broad 50,000 foot view recommendation wise on what they should be doing from a habitat and supplementation standpoint. And some people utilize me more than others. Again, by doing that, I learn just as much from a lot of these people as they get out of me. So the best thing I can do is get boots on the ground on any ranch, because that's just, like I said, every one of them's different, and we constantly learn something from somebody, just depending on where I'm at. But yeah, now the only way to do it is it's got to be on their time most of the time, because nobody usually lives on the ranch. But a lot of times too, most of the places where I deal with it, I'm not typically dealing with the owner. I do on some, don't get me wrong. But the majority of the time I'm dealing with a manager, somebody that has a biology degree, or somebody that's been managing a property or hunting, operation for years. So that's really an enjoyable piece of my job, because I get to kind of learn from their knowledge and what they've done from an experience and their lifetime as well. So and they're there all the time. So
right.
At least from a rural standpoint, I don't typically have time scheduling, guys with the ones that have boots on the ground anyways.
Yeah, I mean, they're there living, eating, and breathing it every day. I have a buddy who's a ranch manager in South Texas, and the owner's there. He's got a vested interest in it. He's there a lot, looking at the animals. But if you have a question, you go to this guy, because he's living on the property. He's there 24/7.
Yep. There's a lot of them live and breathe it. And a lot of times they just enjoy having somebody to come talk to them, just because they don't get off the ranch, because it's a full-time job. If you want to be a ranch manager, it's like running a feedlot. You're there 7 days a week, and you're tied to it. And that's why I was talking about the high fence deal. If you're doing it right, you got to have somebody out there checking the fence every day, checking the water, being sure. You got to have somebody doing something every day out there, just to be sure you don't fall in a hole, because it can happen quick.
Yeah.
Hunting Matters is presented by DEA Ranch. Are you looking for the ultimate South Texas hunting experience? Then look no further than DEA Ranch. DEA Ranch offers some of the best whitetail and exotic game hunts in South Texas year-round. Whether you're looking to fill your freezer or put that next hunting memory on the wall, their professional guides are focused on ensuring each client has a memorable and exciting hunting experience. DEA Ranch offers guided hunts, professional staff, chef-prepared meals, trophy preparation, and more. To learn more, go to dearanch.com. That's dearanch.com.
Bobby, besides, you talked about the water issue before. What are some other common mistakes? Because I know we sometimes have guests, or we have, audience of people who are new landowners. They've just got a ranch, that sort of thing. And I know you guys are great resources of information. What are some of the other common mistakes that people make as far as managing habitat and wildlife on their properties?
Probably the number one problem that I'm going to see on any ranch that I get on is going to be exceeding the carrying capacity of that property, meaning that just because they do have supplemental feed, which feed companies love it, obviously, because the more animals that are out there, the more feed they're going to eat. But from a management standpoint, if you're wanting those animals to, maximize what their genetic potential is, you have to operate within the carrying capacity of that property, meaning that the habitat needs to be able to sustain whatever the animal population is. So that's the biggest one, because when you exceed that carrying capacity and your habitat begins to go down, then that, I don't care how much feed you're putting out there, that diet of every animal that's out there is going to go down as well. And when the diet goes down, nutritional planning goes down, performance goes down, whether we're talking about reproduction, body condition, antler production, you name it. So it's all tied, directly together. So being sure you're operating within a carrying capacity
Hmm.
is obviously going to be the first one. Being sure your herd dynamics are right, buck-doe ratios, things like that, are correct or important. A lot of people worry about genetics, I think, way too much. I mean, I know we can really pump up the genetics on a ranch really quick by, releasing deer on it, or, some of the different programs that are out there. But the biggest thing I think a lot of people do is they put the cart before the horse and don't worry about the habitat, getting the numbers right, and even evaluating what existing genetics they have. Because a lot of times, if you'll manage whatever the native population is correctly, there's been gobs of studies done on this. Your average Boone and Crockett score is going to be a lot better than what you think it is currently. So not being so quick to punt. I'm not saying that bringing new genetics in is bad. We have a high fence ranch over by in Mills County by Gulfweight, where that's what we did. We wanted to grow big deer and we wanted to do it fast, so we went in and we high fenced. It's only like 350 acres, but we just tried to remove as much of the native population as we can and put improve genetics from deer breeders out there, and we can grow 200-inch deer out there every year. I mean, genetics is important if you're trying to grow that kind of deer, but I'm not saying you can't grow Boone and Crockett deer with existing genetics. So it just takes good management. So I think that's something that's kind of in the back of everybody's mind. Genetics are important, but you really don't. That's something that you should worry about after everything else is right. Habitat should be right. Your water needs to be right. Don't be dumping a bunch of deer into an existing native population. That's just it's not going to take hold. A lot of different things like that. I could go on and on all this stuff I've seen over the years that people have tried and done, where you just go, wow, what were they thinking? But those are some of the main ones that I run into that are pretty common, especially to somebody that's
Right.
new to the industry.
I'm on a lease. I've been on a lease for quite a while now, and this place I've been on is in the hill country, low fence. Um, and, it's pretty strict management as far as, what you can shoot, can't shoot, supplemental feeding. There's always water on the property. And I've been amazed at the deer that we see out there
Yeah.
just from everybody. There's 15 of us on that lease, but everybody's, we got a gentleman's agreement that this is what we shoot and don't shoot, and we let walk and don't let walk. And I've been amazed I show pictures of people this place. I'm like, they're like, where is this? I'm like, it's in the hill country. It's a low fence, like 5,000 acres low fence, but we all have a pretty strict, rule about what we do and don't do on that thing. And I've been amazed at the deer that's come off that place. And I just sit and, at this point in my hunting career, I sit more and watch more than anything. But I've been amazed at what a supplemental feeding program has done for that property, and proper management has done for it. And so some people say, oh, it's a low fence, you can't control. I'm like, yeah, I've seen it. It can be done.
Yeah, no, you can. I mean, they say the average home range of deer in Texas is 2.5 miles. So you get 5,000 acres, you can definitely influence the population. But, like I said, that's where a lot of people, I think, kind of worry about the wrong things, because the number one thing, if you want to see bigger deer, is what? You got to let them get old enough, right? So
Hmm.
it's shooting those deer before they're physiologically mature. And if you're managing a property correctly, and there's going to be some biologists probably argue with me that this isn't correct, but if the goal of any ranch, regardless of genetics, should be to have 25% of your buck population to be in that 4.5 or older category. And there are very, very few ranches that fall into that criteria. But if you can manage a property so that 25% of your deer herd or your buck population is in that mature age class, which is 4 or older, you're going to have a lot bigger deer and a lot more to see.
Yeah.
But most of the time, people get hung up on this is a management deer, or this is a cull, or, I'm not even going to go down the rabbit hole with the spike deal. But
Right. Yeah.
um, the biggest part is just people we like to shoot deer,
Yeah.
especially on, hunting leases. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but if you want to see more big deer, you have to let them get old enough, and you have to let the population mature to a point that you get to that 25% or more in that 4.5 or older age class. Or you're just going to, you see a lot of ranches have something I'll call where they plateau out. We can't grow
Mm.
anything over 150 inches. Well, a lot of these deer that you're taking out of the herd when they're yearling, 2-year-old, 3-year-old type deer, because you think they're a cull deer or a management deer, might have just had a tough year. They might have got sick. They might have got hurt. They might have been a late-born fawn. There's no telling what the issue was. But I'm not saying that there's not sure enough some deer out there that are, that dude needs to go. But I think letting some of those deer more of those deer get into the mature age class would help a lot more genetically and from a trophy standpoint than shooting them at an earlier age. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we saw last year. I saw a ton of deer that were in that 4.5 year old category, and there were a couple. It was really hard for me to let walk, but I knew that they weren't there yet. But we saw, I can't tell you how many I've got on camera that were like, that deer's not quite 5 yet, and we just we let them go and that sort of thing. And so I think that we got that benefit that we have that big 4-year-old, 4.5-year-old age group out there.
Nobody wants to imagine an emergency on a hunting trip, but when the unexpected happens, you want the team of medical and security experts at Global Rescue to be there for you. Global Rescue Operations Centers are staffed by experienced personnel, and you'll always speak to an expert on the first call. Global Rescue provides unparalleled capabilities to transport members to the hospital of their choice, not just the closest. So trade what-ifs for peace of mind with convenient travel services designed for the unexpected. Learn more at globalrescue.com/hunting matters.
I'm curious, in your experience, a lot of people are listening, watching the program. How much of a difference really can a supplemental feeding program like the one you guys provide through Record Rack really affect your herd health and your antler growth? And again, we're talking to people who may not bought into this yet or be actually taken part of a supplemental feeding program. Tell our audience a little bit about how much that can affect your deer herd or your exotic herd for that matter.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, there's a lot of, first of all, it's not cheap to supplementally feed deer because if you're going to do it correctly, you have to feed, preferably year round, at least January through August for whitetail deer. But you're going to see better results from a total herd health standpoint if you feed year round. So there's an investment to be made there, right? And a lot of people have been burned or they've tried it and they didn't see a response because I'm not going to call anybody out specifically, but there's a lot of feeds that are out there that are just feeds. They're a substitute for habitat and they're not a true supplement. Like the way we formulate our feeds, we form them as a supplement to complement native habitat, meaning they can get more out of the fiber that's whatever their native browse plants are. They can digest it better, and they can also, it improves the digestive health from the rumen all the way to the small intestine. So they're actually getting more out of the feed and what they're consuming from that standpoint, where a lot of feeds that have a lot of grain packed in them and are just hitting the crude protein, fat, and fiber type stuff. You can see a little bit of a bump right there, but you're not going to see, the response you should be, which on a well-managed ranch where we've got our population right, we've got, we're not exceeding our carrying capacity by too much. When you supplementally feed, you can carry more deer and not hurt your habitat as well. So that's another benefit. But on most ranches where we're feeding and we're doing it right, it's kind of it's an evolution, right? The first time when you first put feed out, deer are going to look at those feeders kind of like a cow at a new gate. They're not all going to go and start consuming protein immediately, but some of them will. So you're going to see a little bit of a bump your first year. Then typically about year 3, you see an even further bump, at least from a trophy quality and body condition standpoint, because deer are conditioned to eating protein by then. They've been on it for a few years, and you're starting to see those younger middle-aged bucks that learn to eat feed. You're starting to see that response. And then at year 5 is when stuff should really start clicking. And by then you've got deer that were basically in utero they were inside mom and she was eating protein, and it starts then. The better nutritional plane you can provide for that doe when that baby's inside her, the better that baby's going to express their genetics down the road. That's been proven in not only deer, but other species as well. So like I said, by year 5, what we should be seeing on feed versus no feed on that same ranch, probably a 10 to 15% improvement on average Boone and Crockett score is what I see on most ranches, where they have really good records, obviously, where we can quantify it. But if you're doing it right, you're keeping the right feed out, you're feeding them when you need to, you should see a 10 to 15% improvement on your antler production scores and body condition scores. Now, a lot of people get confused about nutrition, thinking that, well, if I start feeding, I should see more 10 or 12 points or something like that. You can't take a good feed and turn a deer that's genetically predisposed to be an 8-point into a 12-point. I mean, he's going to be whatever, whatever God gave him at the end of the day. But how well they express those genetics is going to depend on the nutritional plan. And that's what we do with supplemental feed. Like, if you just look at habitat throughout the year, if you went out there and took samples every month, that nutritional plane is going to be going up and down. And it's tied to rainfall, obviously. So the more it rains, the more it goes up. The less it rains or dry it gets, the more it goes down. So what we do with supplemental feed is we just take those peaks and valleys out so that it's right here all the time. And by doing that, that's when we see that. That's the magic number that I'm after. If you're not seeing that kind of a response, we typically got some kind of issue going on from a herd dynamic standpoint, carrying capacity, or not enough supplemental feed, or we need to do some habitat improvement or something. But that's the goal at the end of the time, to make it worth the investment.
Yeah.
In the heart of nature, give your deer the nutrition they deserve with Record Rack deer feeds. The premium feeds support antler growth and overall herd health. Whether you're a wildlife enthusiast or a dedicated hunter, Record Rack deer feeds provide essential nutrients for a thriving herd. Choose Record Rack deer feeds for optimal deer nutrition. Visit recordrack.com to learn more.
It sounds like a jigsaw puzzle all the time, based on the different property and the different weather conditions, and I don't know if you've heard this, but we have, occasionally we have a drought problem in Texas, but for people outside of Texas that, that don't know, how do you advise landowners or ranch managers when you're at a drought period? Do you have to change the feeding, the type of feed, or how does that work? I'm asking you from an uneducated standpoint.
Yeah, we alter the nutrient density of the ration that I'm going to recommend. Like, if you just look in Texas, if we pulled every ration that we make currently that's a wildlife ration, we have over 300 different rations that we make for combinations of deer feed. So yeah, it's not like we have a 20 and a 16 and that's all we have. We have different energy levels, different fiber levels, different protein levels, and different additives that we put in there that could possibly help with fiber digestion and higher intake. So basically, I guess the simple answer is, when it doesn't rain, deer are going to eat more feed, right? So when they eat more feed, the nutrient density of that ration doesn't have to be as high. So say we're in an extreme drought on a ranch that typically feeds 20% deer feed on an average rainfall year, we're going to drop down to a 16, or even in some extreme cases, a 14% protein that may not have quite as high of a fat level and has a little bit more digestible fiber built into it. So basically more of a complete type ration, because they're consuming more of it. Because again, this is, at the end of the day, somebody's got to pay for this stuff. You want it to be economically feasible. And that's kind of what the number one thing I try to do for most ranches is help them meet whatever holes are in their habitat, or, from environmental challenge or whatever. But to do it as economically feasible as possible, you got to know what's going on out there in the pasture, and it's all tied to rainfall. So yeah, you would alter the nutrient profile of that feed, just wouldn't be as nutritionally dense. So I guess most people go from a 20 to a 16, or a 16 to a 14% protein. And then again, it's not that simple. I'm trying to simplify it because I can get off in the weeds pretty quick with the ration stuff. But there's a lot of different things that we can put in there that help from a pre and probiotic standpoint, rumen health. That we formulate feeds now, at least from our formulation system standpoint. We have values that are specific to whitetail deer or exotics. I mean, we have deer metabolizable energy levels that we try to meet, depending upon what the intake level is. And we, a lot of different things from a mineral standpoint, but it's all basically tied directly to intake. So as intake goes up, we alter the nutrient profile. That's all tied to what Mother Nature's doing.
Right. And I know you've been involved with research and development and formulation over the years, and you gave some insight in your last answer there about how those products are developed and altered, designed, that sort of thing. I'm guessing that's kind of a cool part of the job.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. I mean, I wrote my thesis on, it was actually kind of tied to some goat stuff or deer or wildlife stuff. If we had to use goats to do it, we were just looking at secondary plant metabolites and chelates and different, seeing how they'd chelate and pass through the system and not cause negative effects and things like that. Because one thing really cool about white-tailed deer, or even just deer and exotics, period, is they're for the most part the ones that fall into the concentrate selector part. As far as they're the ones that basically they eat a lot of different things from a lot of different plants. And they're if you tested what their actual diet was versus taking everything that's growing out there and you averaged it out, their diet would be up here, where here would be the average of everything. So they're able to select a diet that is better than, say a cow went out there and just basically was eating everything that they could get their mouth on. So
Right.
I've always found that intriguing on how, I don't know if you want to call it nutritional wisdom or what, but how that actually works. I know it's based off of feedback and how quick they can, experience that, and getting to mess with a lot of the different additives and things that we've done. We've done a lot of in vitro research, in the labs, but my deal is kind of dealing with the animal response. What we actually see in the field is what I love about being able to go and we tweak this, or we use this additive instead of that additive, this flavoring instead of that flavoring, whatever. And what we know is going to work in the lab from an in vitro standpoint. When I say in vitro, most of the time we're dealing with deer rumen fluid and what we should see from a physiologic response, what we believe, but then taking that out into the field and then seeing a deer go, yep, that works. And they eat more of it consistently. They prefer it over whatever we were looking at before. That's a really fun part of the job. I'd probably say one of the funnest parts of it, I would say, for me.
That's one of the reasons I was excited about talking to you today, because I don't think, me as a common everyday hunter, I don't have a ranch. I don't manage land. I think people sometimes forget that the amount of science and testing that goes into supplemental feeds. Most of, let's go pick up some bags of corn and throw it out, or let's go buy some feed, just drop it in the protein feeders. You hear that, but it's cool to hear there's so much science and so much lab work and analysis that goes into that. I think probably 99% of the people out there have no idea. They think, they're just trying a new feed, different flavor, and that sort of thing.
Are you looking for a smarter way to manage your document imaging and print environment? Dex Imaging delivers industry-leading printers, copiers, and fully managed print services designed to cut cost, boost productivity, and simplify your workflow. Whether you're a small business or a Fortune 500 company, Dex provides personalized local service with the power of a national network, so you get fast, reliable support wherever you are. Dex gives back, proudly supporting organizations like Houston Safari Club Foundation by giving through profit sharing. Dex Imaging, smarter technology, exceptional service, proven results. Visit deximaging.com or email Adam Montgomery at adam.montgomery@deximaging.com.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone so far as we've pulled different, I went with my background in plant taxonomy and things like that. Was able to go and pull browse samples from across the state, basically looking at preferred browse species. And, we would actually send that to our lab, because when I say we're making a supplement, we've got the research to back it up, where we're actually looking at how we're improving the digestibility of those forages when these different functional ingredients that are in our rations are consumed by that animal. So, it's all built up by science. It's not just a claim. And that's one thing Cargill is very serious about. If we say it, it's because we got something to back it up, not just because we Googled it or whatever. And I guess if imitation is any kind of form of flattery, if you look at most rations out there now, that they're going to be talking, I'm not talking anybody's deer feed, they're going to be talking about higher fat, they're going to be talking about chelated trace minerals, they're going to be talking about yeast or pre and probiotics, the things that I've already said, and that stuff we've been doing, for 20 years. So really, really cool to work for a company that's kind of on the forefront and a leader from an innovation standpoint.
Yeah, well, even as a guy who doesn't own land and management, I mean, I know that Cargill and animal nutrition are synonymous. I mean, they go hand in hand, and it's been y'all's legacy for so long. You see a lot and you hear a lot about more and more exotics in Texas. A lot more people want them, they got them, whatever. That's got to offer its own unique set of challenges when you're trying to manage a land and a habitat that's got both native whitetail and exotics on it, right?
It's hard to do, and that's a hard conversation to have with a lot of these landowners is, well, I want to grow 250-inch deer and I want 27 different species of exotics. And again, it all comes down to carrying capacity. Once you exceed how many chairs are at the table, people are going to start getting skinny. So, and it's the same with animals. And that's the challenge with it, is because exotics are very good at competing. I mean, they're going to want what a deer is going to be looking for from a diet standpoint. All exotics are going to want that first. And then once that's gone, they're very opportunistic. They can go over and start eating coastal or grass or whatever, tree bark. I mean, a lot of them can stay fat on rocks. Where a white-tailed deer, once that habitat gets depleted, they're going to start going backwards. So it's extremely hard to do that unless somebody's really good at managing, a population within carrying capacity. And I don't see it very often. So you can have some success. And I mean, it's like I was talking about that property that we have over in Mills County. We have deer and some exotics on it, just a few species, but we really control the numbers, and we're able to still grow good deer. So it's really hard to do because exotics are so prolific. It doesn't take long, and you've got more of them than you can. You turn around and you've got 100 black bucks standing there, and the bigger ones, especially, like they'll be belly deep in clover, and they're going to stand under a feeder and eat, and they're going to outcompete them, not just from a habitat standpoint, but for a feed standpoint, which it's tough. So
Yeah.
Most of the time, if people are serious about it and they really want to grow them, they do end up segregating them so that they have a whitetail trophy pasture, and then they've got exotics in another one. If they want to have high numbers anyways. If not, you got to have low numbers or it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Gunworks just launched a new rifle system. It's called Index. It's sized for adventure and engineered for extremes. With barrel lengths as short as 16 inches and a folding stock that collapses to an ultra-short profile, the Gunworks Index fits nicely in a UTV, a float plane, or across the seat of your truck without sacrificing accuracy. The Index features a built-in ARCA and pick rail for use on tripod or bipod, and a night vision rail to ensure you're ready for any scenario. The Gunworks Index delivers magnum capability in the most compact chassis rifle system on the market. Visit gunworks.com to learn more.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that change, over the years. The exotic population being one. How have you seen? Have there been any big shifts in animal nutrition, the science, technology behind it in the past 20 years that you've observed?
Really, from a feed manufacturing standpoint, it's been tremendous because most of these feeds are pelleted feeds. Cargill's not just a leader from a nutrition standpoint. From a production standpoint, our plants are state of the art. So how we manufacture these feeds, the ingredient testing that we do, being just basically from a quality control standpoint, it's night and day difference. Where we've gotten to the point now for where we screen feeds, not only at the plant, we screen them off the truck. We're actually taking samples and, doing different tests, just figuring out how much fines that's allowable into a ration, because most of the places that use bulk supplemental feed, they use those pneumatic blower wagons to put that feed out, and if it has a lot of dust or fines or powder in it, it can clog those things up, and nothing's going to make a ranch manager madder on a 104-degree day is having to clog a pneumatic blower wagon. So that's a big part of of what I've seen that's changed a lot is what we had to do if anything, bulk deer feed has to be cleaner than even horse feed, because that's where a lot of customers, these larger commercial operations in particular, that's what they expect. So you got to be able to make a good clean pellet. But then aside from that, the energy stuff that we're doing now, when we first started making supplemental feed, you didn't see a deer ration that was over 3 or 4% fat. And really it was the school of thought, well, deer don't have a gallbladder. They can't digest this stuff, which was not correct. They do still produce bile salts. And what we found is fat, I can influence antler characteristics, reproduction, body condition by getting more energy versus protein into that animal any day of the week. So if anything, I believe that's one of the most limiting nutrients, and that's what we've learned and proven out over the last 20 years, where most of the rations that we have now are anywhere from 4 to 8% fat, depending on if we're talking about breeder supplements or, complete rations out in the pasture. So the energy level that you can, that what we once thought 20 years ago that deer needed versus what we figured out can actually blow some of these things up was completely wrong. So, but you can't just throw a scoop of animal fat or something in there. The sources that we constantly look at that annually, looking for the more digestible sources, through some of this in vitro stuff that I've talked about and just through feeding trials in general. But you got to know, ingredient standpoint, what's going to be digestible, what's not. So that's been a big part, the energy thing. And again, everybody's kind of followed our coattails on that one, that fought us when we first started doing this about 10, 15 years ago, said, oh, they're wrong. Now everybody in the business has a 6 or 8% fat deer feed. Yeah. So, that's been a big one. And then the second thing is I'm not a big silver bullet kind of guy where say you put this one ingredient in your ration and you're going to see this. Mm-hmm. But, nutrition is basically kind of compounds on top of itself. So anything we can do to help from a rumen health standpoint, the additives that we're using in these rations that basically just improve performance, basically like probiotics would for a human being, it's the same with deer. So a lot of that technology, we've got 7 or 8 different custom additives that we've got that help anywhere from, an immune response standpoint to reproduction to stress, tick control. I mean, we got a bunch of different things that can, whatever the environment throws at us, hopefully try to address.
Yeah.
The Houston Safari Club Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports the future of hunting and conservation. Wildlife and habitat conservation, youth education and outdoor experiences, scholarships, and anti-poaching efforts are just a few of the programs supported by this organization. Monthly events, an annual convention, award-winning publications, networking opportunities, and valuable resources for hunting knowledge are just a few of the benefits of being a member of Houston Safari Club Foundation. If you're searching for a group of people dedicated to protecting the future of hunting, look no further. Join Houston Safari Club Foundation today at wehuntwegive.org or call 713-623-8844.
Let me talk to Bobby the biologist, not Bobby the record right guy, for a second. You hear, I've seen it years ago, and occasionally I'll show up at a ranch and they'll have it and stuff. Cottonseed hull. Is that still a thing? Are they still feeding that? Is it good? Is it bad in your opinion as a biologist?
Whole cottonseed?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, whole cottonseed. There's nothing wrong with whole cottonseed. The only thing whole cottonseed can do on any place that I get, if they're feeding whole cottonseed, I tell them keep feeding it. I mean, it's a good source of energy and a good source of protein. It's just not a complete supplement. But if you feed a good balanced protein and whole cottonseed together, it's better. They get more out of the cottonseed. Yeah. They're going to eat less protein. The two complement each other. So I'm never going to tell anybody to not feed whole cottonseed. The only thing you've got to be concerned with whole cottonseed, and A&M Kingsville's proved this one over and over, but is you can't feed whole cottonseed that has a high level of gossypol in it, which gossypol is a secondary plant metabolite that causes, I'm not going to say it's going to make bucks sterile, but it will cause issues with testicular circumference, and you could have repro issues because of it. So as long as it doesn't have high gossypol levels, which a lot of times if you're buying feed bulk from a gin and it's held back, it might be hot on gossypol. So that's the only thing I would, anybody that is utilizing it, be sure you know what the gossypol level is, and once get with a biologist or a nutritionist to be sure it's not too hot.
So I'm not a biologist or a nutritionist. Gossypol, what is that?
It's just a secondary plant metabolite that's produced when cotton gets stressed, basically.
Okay.
Okay. So it's like a defense mechanism. So when there's high levels of it.
Yeah, that you can test for that though.
Say it again.
You can test for that?
Yes. No, you can test for it. The gin should know what the level is already, but if it doesn't have a test for it, I would definitely recommend getting it tested because, the ranches, I had one of our largest customers call me and say, hey man, I got this load of cottonseed, going to have any issues? And I said, well, what's the gossypol level in it? He goes, oh, I don't know. I said, well, you might want to get it tested. And it was about 10 times the level that it should be, to the point that it could cause if it's high enough, you can even see issues with lactating females and fawns and things like that. So it was high enough to the point that I told them I would throw it in the ditch, bury it, do something, but I wouldn't feed it. So yeah, definitely test it for gossip pollen. That would be the only caution I would have by feeding it. Other than that, it's good stuff. I use it on my ranch when I can get my hands on it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's good to know. Not to divulge any trade secrets or anything, do you see any future trends as far as supplemental feeding and wildlife and habitat management down the road? Any new things we should be aware of?
Really, the number one thing is just getting better at feed utilization. I think the biggest, and this is me buying feed, not me being a feed rep, but is when you put feed out, non-target animal consumption or loss or feed being wasted, whether it's from rain or whatever. And feeder design has gotten, a quantum leap versus where we were 20 years ago. So that's obviously helped. But some different things from a weather resistance standpoint, and also just as we go into this species specific, like with exotics, we talked about how the exotic deal continues to grow every year and year. The nutritional requirements, a lot of these exotics is going to be different, and even quantifying what the actual nutritional requirements are for white-tailed deer. We learn more about it every year. I'm sorry, but anybody that tells you they know exactly what a white-tailed deer needs nutritionally based on what stage of production that we're talking about, that book hasn't been written. So being able to admit that and learn from what you're doing, and being able to adjust those rations annually so that we're doing something. We're not, from my opinion, most of our rations are probably over formulated, from a nutrient standpoint. So being able to dial those rations in specifically for whatever species that we're talking about, to be sure that every dime that we're putting into that feeder is going to give me some kind of a return, I think is, that's the direction we're headed anyways.
Awesome. That's good to know. Is there anything that stands out at you over your past 20 years of doing this that you're kind of like, yeah, that was pretty cool. That's something I'm really proud of.
Really just the pushing the energy envelope. A lot of people kind of looked at me sideways when I said I want to put 6% fat into the feed. And, I had my stuff I've been playing with on my own, and talking to some other guys, nutritionists in particular. There was a gentleman named Dr. Daryl Huck, who was a nutritionist for ACO Feed that I learned a lot from. And to kind of give you the history of where Record Rack came from, Cargill acquired Anderson Clayton ACO in South Texas, who'd been making deer feed under the Sportsman Choice brand for who knows 20, 30 years, and they acquired them in like the 80s. So Record Rack was actually formulated, though, originally by Dr. Huck, and one of the best small ruminant nutritionists that I've ever worked with. But it was always his, kind of inkling that kind of led me down this trail. And he just said, we got to be careful on what sources that we're using, what levels and all that. And then being able for Cargill to trust me to the point that we actually went into, we didn't do a whole lot of testing. We put it out in the market because, we tested it and found that the palatability was there, and we didn't have any issues with deer in confinement, so we rolled with it. So for Cargill to stand behind me and believe if this was going to be a real trend and something that was going to actually work, that's probably one of the things I'm most proud of.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Bobby Dees, man, we really appreciate your time, folks. Bobby Dees, a wildlife specialist with Record Rack Deer Feeds. Check out their website at recordrack.com. That's RECORDRACK.com. And Bobby, how, somebody's just bought a property, they inherited a property, or they just need to change what they're doing. Do they just go to the website and contact you guys?
Yeah, that's the best way to get us. No matter where you're at in the United States, that all gets vetted through, and a lot of times it finds its way to me, especially if it gets too far down the technical trail. But we have reps all the way, from New Mexico to New York, Canada to Mexico. So get on our website, type in you'd like to talk to somebody about supplementally feeding deer or whatever, and we'll have somebody get in touch with you and hopefully help you out.
Awesome, Bobby. We appreciate your time, man. I learned a lot just in an hour's time. So thank you so much for sharing that knowledge and information with us.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank y'all for having me.
You betcha, folks. We'll see you here next week on Hunting Matters podcast, brought to you by the Houston Safari Club Foundation. Hope everyone has a great week.
Hunting Matters is a Houston Safari Club Foundation production. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. For questions or more information, email us at info@wehuntwegive.org.